Hi, everybody. Welcome to Reading Between the Lines. I'm Sarah, and I have the absolute honor of being joined today by Rufi Thorpe. Rufi, how are you?
Good. Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. For anyone who's not familiar with Rufi, let me give you a quick little bit of background about her. Um, Rufi Thorpe received her MFA from the University of Virginia in 2009, and she has written four novels. The first being The Girls from Corona del Mar, Dear Fang with Love, and her most recent, not actually her not her most recent, she's also written The Knockout Queen, and that was a finalist for the Penn and Faulkner Award. And then her newest book is Margot's Got Money Troubles, which I'm really going to lean into talking about today. This was released in the summertime, and she currently lives in California with her husband and two sons. So um, I am just so thrilled to have you. And I wanted to actually talk a little bit about like the synopsis first of Margot's Got Money Troubles,
Yeah.
just so that people know like what is this book about. So I'll read that real quick. So Margot is the daughter of a Hooters waitress and an ex-pro wrestler and is struggling to find her path. She's 20, she's a single mom, unemployed and facing eviction after a brief affair with her English professor, and she's pregnant. So when her estranged father, Jinx, shows up, she trades him a place to stay for childcare help. And desperate for money, Margot starts an OnlyFans page using Jinx's wrestling tips on how to craft a really incredible persona. And her fame begins to grow and she is starting to make some money. But, Margot's got a lot of things to decide about, the price of internet stardom and what that's worth and how to have relationships with people outside of that. And this book was just so blisteringly funny, sharp, tender, and also full of self-empowerment, which I absolutely loved. So with all of that, I wanted to ask you about your novels always have characters that are really navigating very intense and sometimes volatile relationships in their lives. And there is that sense of humor, though, that you add. So, how do you strike a balance between that raw emotional depth, but then also the humor in your writing?
Well, I don't know that there's ever been a time that I've laughed harder than at the mortuary making my grandmother's funeral arrangements. I mean, I think some people find the
Yeah.
tragedy of life funny. I mean, like in my defense, it was that every single item had an insane, ridiculous name. Like it was like, you can put her ashes in a bench of remembrances in the garden of whispering paths. And like every urn had this insane name. And we were just getting the giggles, me and my mom. I think life either strikes you as funny or it doesn't.
Yeah.
And like similarly, I feel like some of the times I've laughed hardest in my life have been like in the ER or like there is nothing left to do sometimes in life but laugh. And as a writer, I feel like sometimes humor can actually help leaven the text so that you can stand to read about these hard things. Like
Yeah.
no reader wants to just get hit in the face over and over again, no matter how good the writing is. Although I guess it does vary. There's the A Little Life readers. Like I loved A Little Life, and I was like, but then
Yeah.
there was like yet another abduction like in the last third of the book, and I was like, I can't. Like I gave up and I couldn't do it
Yeah.
anymore.
It was too
Um,
much.
it's just too much. So I feel like humor can actually be sort of like the spoonful of sugar that enables you to talk about topics that are hard to talk about. I think
Yeah.
stand up comedy, I think what makes something funny is actually when somebody is saying the thing you're not allowed to say.
Yeah,
Because
it's true.
laughter is a release of tension.
Yeah.
And so if you think about it, like stand up comics don't limit themselves to material that's like light. I think when we think about comedy and literature, a lot of times we're thinking about like big C comedy, like the idea of like a farce or a romantic comedy
Yeah.
where nothing too serious can happen and the danger can never be too real. And humor is maybe a completely separate element than big C comedy.
Absolutely. I really found, well, I have so many questions. The first is your family loves wrestling. Is that true?
Yes, yeah.
So it probably wasn't too difficult to do some of the research for Jinx for his character.
Well, I was already doing okay. So I didn't grow up watching wrestling.
Okay.
Was raised by a single mom and my grandma. We were not putting on, Monday Night
No.
Raw. It was that was not our
No.
entertainment of choice growing up. And so, but my husband very much grew up like a Hulkamaniac, say your prayers and take your vitamins, and then stayed a fan through the Attitude Era and was sentimental about it. And so when the pandemic started, we like got a trampoline. Our boys were 4 and 7, and he started putting wrestling on. And that's like all I wanted to do all day was wrestle on the trampoline. And I think he was hoping to get them to fall in love with wrestling. I think unexpectedly, it was me who fell in love with it. Um, and to me, I think I already had been such a fan of drag that when I first started watching pro wrestling, I like had a
Yeah.
category for it. I was like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, we're going to dress up in weird outfits and be catty as shit to each other. I'm in, And so
It's pretty much like
it's really
RuPaul's Drag
similar.
Race a little bit. You're right. You're
There's
totally right.
well, and like there's an aesthetic to wrestling, like the garishness of wrestling that I kind of really like. And like the way that everybody's gimmicks don't match in any artist, it has the vibes of a group project that's gotten out of control.
100%.
Like some people are like all goth and like, oh, I'm the Undertaker and I have this enchanted urn. I mean, the way that it is all silly is also
Yeah.
wonderful to me.
Yeah.
So it has like an outsidery art feeling to it.
For
Um,
sure.
and then I got really obsessed, and I didn't know wrestling was going to go in this book at all. I just got obsessed with reading wrestling memoirs because I discovered, I think because of kayfabe, but because of this concept that the storylines are fake and the matches are fake,
Yeah.
there is a hunger in wrestling fans to want to know the real story. And this has created in them pretty much every wrestler of any repute has at least one, if not multiple published memoirs. They just have a really rich literary tradition. Wrestling fans will
Yeah.
buy books and support books, and they read a lot. And so,
I had no
um,
idea.
yeah, I didn't either. But then imagine my delight, and the stories are off the chain. And it's like you can just endlessly read these wrestling memoirs. I was having so much fun, just obsessed. And then my mom, I was telling her almost every wrestling story involves like something gross that your mother doesn't want to hear about, like
Sure.
someone pooping themselves or poking someone else's eye out or whatever. And she was like, if only there's some way you could put this in your book, like you're clearly obsessed about it. And, maybe then some of these stories could be diverted away from me.
Yeah.
And so then I was like, oh, well, I don't want Margot to be a wrestler. Like the message I'm trying to send is not that it would be easier or better somehow for her. It would be much worse to be a pro wrestler and immediately postpartum. Like that's and also just an unrealistic idea. And then I was like, well, what if it was her dad? And I was really scared to do it because I didn't want to get it wrong. And I was aware that I'm not a lifelong wrestling fan,
Yeah.
and like, what if I like exposed myself or got it really wrong? And so but at the moment I started writing him, he's just, sometimes you get lucky with a character and they just kind of, every
Write
scene they're
themselves.
in lights up. Yeah. And
Yeah.
Jinx was just that way from the very beginning. And so I think I just got lucky.
So with Jinx, did you find that you had like with beta testing, but like beta readers, did you seek out any like real wrestling folks to, how accurate is this character? Like, what do you think?
I was never okay. So first of all, I didn't know at that time anyone in pro wrestling. And so
Yeah.
I based it off of I had my husband read it, who is a lifelong. I just wanted to
Super
pass
fan.
muster with a lifelong fan, you know.
Yeah.
And I knew, for instance, that like all the stories I was quoting were real and were from biographies, like so I knew that I wasn't saying anything counterfactual. And then I also, Kevin Wilson, is a huge lifelong wrestling fan as well. And he read it.
Cool.
And I was like, please tell me if I've made any huge wrestling mistakes or said something that just like sounds stupid. And
Yeah.
he was like, no, looks good. But I never could have imagined actual pro wrestlers were going to read it. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I would have been too scared to write it if I
Yeah.
thought that. And luckily, they've all been like really generous and nice to me about it. I like have gotten a ton of cool interactions with pro wrestlers, with people who write for WWE
Yeah.
now. Being
That's
like, I
cool.
love this book. Like, you got wrestling so right. And I'm like, oh my God, I did. That's so lucky.
That's a huge compliment.
Well, I mean, I guess
Um,
it's just like that people, but I mean, it's like they'd been publishing memoirs telling all about the wrestling industry. You know what I mean? Like, it's not
yeah.
like it was that hard. It's not like I had to gain access to some secret world. It was all public knowledge.
So, my next question for you is similar, except that the other half of this book is the OnlyFans half. And so, what was the research like with that? And I also want to lean into like, you write character like Margot's young and she's got OnlyFan friends who are super young, like in their early 20s. Like, I felt like you were so in you really understood the mindset of these young ladies at that age. So I want to learn, like, ask you more about that as well. But first, what was it like
Well,
researching
I
with
mean, in
OnlyFans?
so many ways, it was the opposite research situation because it
Yeah.
is the kind of thing where there's no memoirs published about it. I mean, obviously, I was able to find really interesting, beautiful memoirs slash like nonfiction work about sex work in general. And
Hmm.
those really helped me
Yeah.
understand some sort of like basic things. And also just, I thought that I didn't have any prejudice against sex work, but I definitely had to disassemble some of my own thinking in order to be able to write her well. And
Yeah.
really examine my own feelings or instincts about it. Um, and then I think so. Basically, what I found was I'm usually really spoiled as a fiction writer, and most people will talk to me about their jobs. Almost everybody, no one in their life is interested in their job. So, whenever you say, like, hey, I'm a novelist, I'm interested in your job, I have to write a character, they'll talk to you usually for free for hours. Even lawyers,
Okay.
like, even doctors, like, everyone wants to help a novelist. And I'm used to this endless goodwill. And so I was like, oh, this will be easy. Like, I know I follow all these OnlyFans girls, like, and I'll just slide into their DMs and no, no, no. Everyone is trying to slide into their DMs. Everyone wants to know about their work. Everyone is trying to get a piece of them. So I was like, there's
Oh.
no way that I'm going to get to them through DMs or through emails. This is a dead end. So what I did was I started a OnlyFans account where I could then send them a $50 tip with a message being like, hey, I'm a novelist, like an actual one. Here are the books that I published. I'm writing a book. I want to portray sex work as work. It doesn't have a moral agenda. I want to portray like what's good about it, what's shitty about it. And I really want to get it right. And I can't get it right
Yeah.
unless I learn more about it.
Yeah.
And so it would be like vital. And so I would say like maybe 20% of girls got back to me at all.
Okay.
And then, and they were like more and less willing to, I mean, so basically I could offer like $20 a question was basically the rate that I settled on.
Okay.
And then, but a lot of times, like, so I'd send the $20 with the question and then they would just decline to answer the question. There's like in order to be a sex worker, you have to have incredible boundaries and you have
Yeah.
to get extremely comfortable saying no. And
Hmm.
honestly, like it was an education kind of in itself. Like even
Yeah.
questions that I considered like open-ended, like a question like, um, if how is the way that you feel about this work different than when you first started?
Yeah.
They were like, I don't feel comfortable answering that. And you're just like, so like no access to my interiority. So it
Mm.
was relatively easy to get answers about like, well, what do most guys put as their usernames? What does your dashboard look like? Any kind of technical question was very easy to get answers about. The more emotional stuff, I kind of had to guess. And
Mm.
it's part of why I kept it really narrow focus on the beginning of Margot's journey, because I don't really know the psychological ramifications of doing this kind of work over an extended period of time.
Yeah.
And whereas I felt like I could imagine, well, how would I react if I started doing this? What would, I could imagine myself into the beginning, but I
Yeah.
didn't feel like I could do a good job imagining myself a year to 2 years in,
Sure.
how that would
Yeah.
change me as a person. And I just didn't have later, of course, after the book came out, all these OnlyFans people reached out to me and were like, you should have asked me. And I'm like, you wouldn't have talked to me. I would have paid you so much money to talk to me, you know? But so if I ever
Yeah.
get to write a part two, I'll have much easier research access.
Yeah.
But I've gotten so far. I mean, I think all the sex workers that I've talked to so far agree that the most unrealistic part of the book is her falling in love with JB, and that you would just never, ever, ever fall in love with a fan.
Okay.
And I was like, fair. Okay.
Okay.
I agree, but also she's just starting out, and also it's fantasy, it's a novel,
Yeah.
she's young, and I don't know.
Yeah.
But I have gotten so far. I mean, surely there are sex workers out there that don't like the way that the book portrayed sex work, but I've only heard from the people who were really gratified by it and who liked the way it was presented and felt like
Fair enough.
humanized by the way it was
Yeah.
presented.
I think that's what it did for me, because I when I first heard about this book, I was like, no, that's not for me. Wrestling, no, hard pass. OnlyFans, I'm not interested in learning more about a character, like that. And my mom, well, thank God, my mom was like, you got to read this book. And so, can you believe it? I know. So my mom loved this book, and I read it right after, and I was like, oh my God, this is the best book. And I think what you've done is, like, I guess, we all, maybe not we all, but just at least for me, I did have some prejudice about sex work as well. I definitely had prejudice about wrestling, and I still might a little bit, but that's okay. But still, I found that it doesn't really matter. Those two components of the book don't matter compared to the way you humanize these characters, and you make them so relatable and real that you love Jinx, and you love Margot, and you love everybody in this book because you feel like they're just a friend or part of your family. And so I really applaud you for writing these characters with so much heart, but also, they're deeply flawed, which we all are. And so that's what makes them so incredibly relatable.
Oh, thank you so much. That makes me so
Yeah.
happy. First of all, I also read almost everything with my mom, and the books I
Yeah.
take the most seriously are the ones that she's like, you have to read this book. And
Exactly.
I
High
don't know. I
praise.
feel like it's such a special thing when you like get to be a reader with your mom.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think that maybe that's what interests me the most about wrestling is like, or anytime that I'm confined,
Yeah.
and a category of people that I'm obsessed with right now is baseball umpires. Because it's just like a personality that I don't have. Like, you have to be like so okay with conflict to be an
You
umpire.
do. You do.
And you have to kind of enjoy it, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
And there's such a long history of almost violent antagonism between players and umpires and crowds and umpires.
Absolutely. Yeah, the crowd,
And
for
it's such
sure.
a weird that I'm just like, who are these guys that are like drawn to umpiring like moths to a flame, But I guess that's like the part that always just interests
Yeah.
me is like, we're all just people, like people who are professional wrestlers, people who are sex workers, we're all just the same. We're all the
Yeah,
same. We're all embarrassingly the same,
absolutely.
Um,
Do you
and
think a
it's
future project will include an umpire?
oh yes, yeah. No,
Oh, good. Okay.
I'm writing a book right now that is about a little league baseball mom who kind of gets like wrapped up in a government conspiracy. So it's like a thriller with like
Okay.
spycraft elements, but also some sci-fi elements, but also an umpire character. So it's like I'm having a blast. Like I'm really having a
I
lot of
love
fun writing it.
sci-fi,
Yeah.
so that's helpful too, but still, like, that sounds incredible. Um, wow. Okay, I'm here for it. I'm ready. So,
I know. Well, I
um,
feel like I've bought myself. I think one of the real hills that's difficult for none of my books sound like a good idea, right? Like it sounds like too many ingredients. Like it's like the thing at the restaurant that you're like, that's crazy. I don't want to order that.
yeah,
But I'm hoping that I'm like slowly with each book, like building an audience that are like, no, there's
yeah.
something that must be uniting those elements if she's putting them together and like it's gonna be fun. I can at least like guarantee the reader they're gonna have a fun time.
Oh, absolutely. I also wanted to mention that, in writing about, at least especially with Margot's Got Money Troubles, when, there is a lot of conflict, and your characters are having like really horrible, icky, it's not horrible, but just, like there's there's conflict. And so
Yes.
you write this beautiful like roller coaster though of like the humor and the conflict, the humor and the funniness and the conflict. And so at these like cringy points where I was like, oh no, I feel so bad for Margot. I can't, it would get funny. And so it was
Mhm.
just, I mean, in general, your writing really blends all of those things so well so that it's just a page turner like for each story. Um, Let me jump back to asking you about getting into the mindset of like 20-year-old women. I mean, you
Okay,
and I have
so I
both
don't
been there, but how?
I think that so I think that having kids kind of keeps you young. I feel like I am more aware of pop culture and internet culture than my
Yes.
similarly aged friends that haven't had kids.
Yeah.
And I have chosen, I'm the experiment. I've let my children have unfettered access to screens.
Yeah.
And I really, the only things that I did was like, I encouraged them to watch YouTube on the big TV screen because if somebody said something a little bit racist or a little bit misogynistic, I like to be able to yell at the screen. And it like, it keeps it open and public. I know
Agreed.
what they're watching, I know what they're thinking about. I know if I think, because I mean, like, isn't it every mother's like terror that their son is going to get red pilled or like turn into some sort of weird incel, you know, like, like that was, I think I was more scared of that than like, well, and
Yeah.
also I didn't grow up playing video games. So I was like, I don't want to knee jerkly reject this whole world. But so when my kids wanted to play Fortnite, I was like, okay, well, let me play it and see
Yeah.
what I think. And then I was like, this game is fun as hell. And it was actually, that was like how my friendship with Kevin Wilson started. We did an event together
Yeah.
and with Amy Bender, and I was so stressed out about it because they were two of like my idols, you know. And so after I
Yeah.
like wrote to thank him and I was like, I'm not going to do anything all day except for play Fortnite with my kids now that that's over. And he was like, oh my God, you play Fortnite? And he plays Fortnite and he's much better at Fortnite than I am. But so then we would sometimes play Fortnite together with our kids. But so I think that having kids and just sort of being involved in their digital life and like we watch a lot of
Yeah.
YouTube and I'm bored, right? Because I don't care about them building a Minecraft world. So then I'm thinking like, who are these guys? They're like, you know, they're younger than me. They've made their whole career on the internet. Like, at what point did they realize they were children's entertainers? You know,
Yeah.
at first they think at first they're making content for peers, and then gradually they're like, oh, my audience is getting younger and younger, and
Yeah.
suddenly you find yourself you're like a 35-year-old man making content for 11-year-olds, and you're like, oh, I'm a clown. Okay, I'm a
Yes.
clown. You know, and like you can like watch this realization dawn over them in real time, you know?
Yeah.
Um, and so I think I just became very curious about the whole influencer economy and
Hmm.
I think I'm just like a little bit more present oriented. Like I
Yeah.
know that a lot of writers are having a really hard time. So the book pipelines are really long, right? It just in
Yeah.
general. So like by the time it takes you like a year or 2 years to write a book, right? And then it takes like a year between when you sell it to when the book comes out. And so it
Right.
used to be you could kind of write a book set in the present by imagining that it's set 3 years from when you're writing it. Now
Yeah.
it's much harder to predict what's going to be going on 3 years from now. Like it's just the
Exactly.
political vicissitudes. It's just so hard to set things in the present, or even in the near future. And
Hmm.
so it complicates things. And I know like other writer friends are like, I just set everything in 2014. I don't want to deal with any of it. I want to write about a world that is pre-COVID. I want to write about, and that just like for whatever reason doesn't feel like enough for me. Like
Yeah.
I don't want to write things only set in 2014. I want to try and write about what's happening right now, even though
Yeah.
it's awkward and weird and I don't really know how to do it.
Yeah.
But so I don't know about young women. I mean, I watch a lot of young women.
Yeah.
I love watching someone like figure out their shtick or like slowly figure out how to present themselves and like
Yeah.
it's just it's endlessly fascinating to me.
Yeah.
This whole attention economy is so weird.
I have a branding and marketing background, and so for me, especially like coming from that lens of things, I loved the branding and the marketing aspect of like how these girls were creating these personas and like the group projects and like the skits and stuff. I thought that was really ingenious. But but I hear what you're saying. Like being a mom, I think also, and being present and understanding, like just being intentional about pop culture and what our kids are consuming. Like I have not played Fortnite, but I mean, my kid she's 13. She loves Roblox. We play
Yeah.
Roblox all the time,
Oh, totally.
you
We
know?
play Minecraft all the time.
Yeah.
Like we have like family worlds where we're all in survival mode, and like I hate mining. I always get lost in the mines and then I lose everything.
Yeah.
They get mad at me. So I'm like
I,
usually the farmer.
I have learned that like any video game that I play with my child, like I cannot be the driver. Like I cannot drive the vehicle like in
I do
Roblox. I
not
cannot.
understand how bad I am at Mario Kart. It makes no
Right.
sense. And why it was so weird. Our 4-year-old could beat the entire family at Mario Kart. And we were like, how is your brain
How?
wired up? Like you can barely walk. You know what I mean? Like you like it's iffy if you're going to be able to climb up onto a bar stool. You know what I mean? Like how are you better at this?
I love
Um,
it.
that's
That's
so
crazy.
interesting.
Um, you have characters also that you write about who I think there's a lot of themes in your novels that explore class and then also ambition and identity and how all those three things come together. And I wondered if that's just I think in talking with you, it seems like that's just those are things that you're curious about in general. Um, and so I guess what I'm asking is, um, why class and why identity? Like, why are
And
those?
money. Well,
Yeah,
okay. So some of it is a part of my artistic journey, if you will, was going from, it's like I fell in love with books, right? And I had sort of like two levels of falling in love with books. Like
yeah,
on the one hand, I am the true narcotic addict. Like it was Sweet Valley High right into my veins. Stephen King, like
oh
there
yeah,
was never any book too trashy for me to read. I loved romance novels, loved mystery, loved sci-fi. I read always really widely, but also did love literary fiction and loved like Russian literature, and
mm,
so when I was in graduate school and stuff, very much what was being held up was this like high literary form. And I was always sort of struggling to fit into it. And I think that where I started to really like find myself was there are certain writers, like to me, Dennis Lehane is one of them, where you're using all of the tools of genre. You're writing a really great, gripping plot, but you're not giving up any depth or nuance. You
yeah,
still have all this symbolism, all these really thorny themes and moral questions and stuff. And so, similarly, like I can remember Louise Erdrich. I was reading The Master Butcher Singing Club in college, and I
hmm,
was just loving it. I was falling in love with it. And my English professor was like, "Oh, what are you reading?" And then I showed him, and he's like, "That's not a real book." And I was like, oh, and okay. but I was like, I think I want to write books that are not real books. Like I think that where I
yeah,
am most interested, and I just sort of started to feel like there was something um hypocritical or sort of like disingenuous about this belief that high literature had to also like abstain from using any of the tools of like plot or suspense.
hmm,
Like why couldn't you have a book be wildly entertaining and deep and profound? And I just didn't see, it seemed like just laziness to me
yeah,
to only use one toolkit or the other. There's no reason structurally why you can't do both. And so as I was figuring out all that, I figured out that I wrote a lot better when I wrote authentically about my
yeah,
own experience. And so when I first started writing about like teen girls in California, that's when the girls from Corona Del Mar, like I started
yeah,
writing about the people I knew, the dads who are real estate agents,
yeah,
nothing. And the closer I set it to real people and drawing from life instead of trying to copy some Russian story, the better my work got. And so for me, like I had always been told that not that money was not a big enough motivator for a character. They always say like a character needs to want something.
yeah,
And that money is like a secondary motivator and not a primary motivator, that it's not like big or deep enough to really motivate a character arc in a novel. And I had just like nodded and written it down in my notebook when whoever said this to me. And so I just had this idea that you couldn't write about money. And yet money was like 99% of why anyone I knew did anything. You
Yeah.
know, your choices in life are always constrained by what you can afford. Like
Mhm.
that's how actual life is lived. And so I literally with Margot didn't know if it was gonna work to have her primary motivation be money.
Yeah.
And then I was like shocked because it seems like you totally can. Like I don't know
I
where
think
that advice that money wasn't a good, where did that even come from? Like from college
yeah.
professors that are just not interested in like reading about how real people live?
Yeah.
I don't know.
And that is Margot's motivation for sure. And I think the second, maybe a second motivator, as I mean, besides carrying, figuring out how to take care of her son, is the relationship that she has with her mom. Like, I can see there's a lot of like acceptance that she wants from her mom. And then, of course, I don't want to spoil it, but we know how that ends. And I think that also gives a lot of backbone to Margot's character as well, besides just the money ambition. But I was there for it with the money ambition, like right there with her.
Yeah, well, because we
So,
all want money because we want the power to be able to live our lives as we want to live them, and
and
the
be in
power
control of it. Yeah.
to be in control of our
Yeah.
destiny, to be able to provide for the people that we love, to be able to make the decisions that are right for us, and to not have to compromise on the things that are important.
Right.
Those things are easy to understand. Like I think if Margot just wanted a Rolex or something, I think it would be a lot less interesting to watch.
Yeah, probably. I should mention to everybody that Margot's Got Money Troubles will be available to watch on Apple TV Plus. Rufi and I are thinking, not that we're like close to the pulse here, but like we're thinking maybe 2026. It
Yeah,
should
so they're
be out.
shooting right now,
Okay.
which is exciting, and I get because what really happens is my mother has updates set on her phone so that every single time my name is mentioned in the news, it like pings her and then she sends it to me. So what it really
Love it.
is people taking pictures of Elle Fanning and her fake baby bump from the shooting and then like put like
Yeah.
tabloids getting it. And so then my mom excitedly texts me these things at like 6 a.m. It's very cute. But the cast is outrageous. David E. Kelly is so talented. It's been like such an exciting masterclass for me in watching how he's turned the book into the show. And
Right.
oh my God, I got to go to the table read. Michelle Pfeiffer
You did
blew my
not.
socks off. Yeah. Oh my God.
Well,
She's so
I should
good.
mention like who was at the table read. So the cast so far is Elle Fanning, Nicole Kidman, Michelle Pfeiffer, and Nick Offerman. I mean, does it
Mhm.
get any better than that? I don't think so.
It sure doesn't. They were spectacular. Like it blew when Nick Offerman said his first line, all the hair on my arms stood up. Like he has put on so much muscle for this role. Like he is total beefcake. It is crazy.
I can't
Um,
even. I can't
yeah.
imagine. I got to go check out like if there's any leaked pictures or anything.
Yeah, no, he's incredible and such an amazing guy. He like went and read all my books. And, like, then it was like he's just a really cool person.
I am so impressed with him.
Yeah.
Now, Nicole Kidman is playing which character, and then what is Michelle Pfeiffer playing, or
So
who is
Michelle
Michelle?
Pfeiffer is Cheyenne.
Okay.
She's Margot's mom.
Yep.
And I don't think that they have announced who Nicole Kidman is playing yet, and it is a
Okay.
character that is not exactly in the book.
Okay.
So it is kind of but it's like it's awesome. It's
Okay.
awesome, and you will enjoy it very much.
I have an
And that's
idea,
all that
maybe,
I can
but
say. I'll tell
okay.
you after if you want.
Okay. Yeah, I'm curious. Okay, so let's switch gears a little bit. I want to be mindful of your time and ask you a little bit about how people can learn to write like you and ways to be able to connect with you and interact with you. The book incubator was something that I know that we wanted to talk about. So I'll let you
Yeah. Well,
take it
so you
away.
can imagine, like, with my own frustration, I've kind of already talked about like how limited I felt by my own MFA. But the problem with MFAs
Yeah.
specifically, I think, is I love the idea of a 2-year program. I mean, first of all, for anyone thinking about getting one, if you can find a fully funded one where they're paying you to go there and you get 2 years of your life to write, then absolutely do it. That's never going to
Yes.
hurt you. Don't get into debt to do an MFA program. And for novelists, it's just really hard because MFAs don't really teach novel writing. Teachers don't want to have to read a whole novel. It's really hard to workshop.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of MFA programs kind of view talking about basic elements of craft as sort of like beneath them.
Yeah.
And so the fun thing about the book incubator, I teach there with a novelist named Mary Atkins, who founded it, and who actually had taken another class of mine. And then I wound up blurbing one of her books and we did an event together. And so then by the time I was looking for a way to teach online, because Catapult had closed, she had already founded the book incubator and like built this whole program. So it's a year-long online book length manuscript creation program. So we teach both memoir and fiction.
Cool.
And we have all different genres. There's no concept that like, romance isn't real writing. Like that's, we're very like genre friendly. And we kind of
Open.
like, the smart thing about the business model, I think, is that we wanted to be able to offer full length manuscript critique without it. The teacher always winds up being the bottleneck, right? Like if you're writing a novel, what you want most is for somebody to read the whole thing and tell you if it's working or not. And how many people can you offer that to over the course of a year? Not that many. So what we did was just hire professional editors from big 5 publishing companies to give manuscript critiques, so that you know what I mean? So that it's no longer just a bottleneck of a single person has to read all these manuscripts. So it's really funny. It's really, really funny. It's really fun. And I just like believe in it. It's really, I can't believe that I'm lucky enough to get to be part of it. And then as part of that, Mary and I were like, what is our like dream best life? And we're like, what if we could write together in like a castle in France? And so then we were like, would people go with us? Like,
yes, they would.
So we rented out this chateau. It's Chateau Caroline, and I think it was actually built as like for Napoleon's niece or something. It was like her special chateau. And it's so gorgeous. So it's like a week at the end of July this summer. I think there's 2 spots we have left.
Okay. I was going to ask.
Yeah. And everything is like catered. So it's like from the time you have to get your own transport, but then everything else is included. So like you take the train down from Paris to, it's in Sancerre, which is in like the Loire Valley where they make all the yummiest white wine.
It's true.
And surrounded by vineyards is this gorgeous castle. Do you know how hard it is to find a castle with enough bathrooms? But we found one where every single person gets their own ensuite bathroom.
I did not know that was a problem, but now I do. So.
Also, the Wi-Fi in castles is really difficult because the walls are too thick for the Wi-Fi signal to go through well. But so hopefully it will all be gorgeous. But so all the meals are catered, all the wines included, and we're just going to like have a blast and talk about writing novels. And we're like having a vineyard come and do like a wine tasting, and it's going to be so fun. There's like a goat farm and you can like feed the baby goats with bottles.
It does sound like living your best life, like checking off all those boxes.
There's a pool, there's a sauna. I mean, I'm bringing my entire family. Like my mom is going. My mother-in-law is also going.
I love it. So cool. All right. Well, that will wrap up our chat today. And I, again, am so appreciative of your time. I will have details in the podcast description, how people can connect with you, and also, of course, learn more about those last 2 spots at the castle.
Well, Instagram's pretty much the only social media that I do anymore. Okay. Twitter's too.
It's chaotic over there.
It's chaotic, and Facebook is too filled with, I don't know, people I actually know.
Also true. I don't like using Facebook for that reason. Yeah. So,
but thank you so much. All your questions are so fabulous. It's so fun getting to talk to you.
Please let me know when the next book is in pre-order and come back and talk to us about it.
Absolutely.
That'd be so fun.
So we can talk all about whatever. I just love baseball players are so weird, and it's such a strange melancholic sport.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes, 100%. All right. Well, Rufi, thank you so much for your time today. This was fantastic.
You.